one could argue that humanity as a whole is enduring a crisis. I could even go as far as to say an existential crisis on many, many levels. I mean, we talk about the sequence of economic crises that have been occurring every few years due to the very same mistakes. It's not that we're learning from a crisis, then moving on, developing our systems, developing our methods, changing our ways. We're using the very same methods. We're simply enhancing the reasons why these crises are being perpetuated. Millions, probably hundreds of millions around the world suffering as a result. The recent COVID epidemic and its everything that outlays that particular series. And of course, the crises of world management, of governments today, of leadership, of solving huge crises, including, for instance, the climate change and the environmental impact on the entire world. And when you find the names that adorn the offices of prime ministers and kings and leaders around the world, you feel totally unsafe. It's like, a huge ship being steered by someone who's an amateur, to say the very best. And then we have what we saw over the course of the past 15, 16 months in Gaza, which showed what I would suggest is moral decay and an ethical vacuum, the likes of which the extent of barbarity that we saw is extremely disconcerting, and it doesn't show of a world that could be entrusted with the welfare of humanity. So that's the general overview. But obviously, you as academics and intellectuals, we're busy with the day-to-day issues. We're busy with the events in Gaza and a ceasefire. We're engaged in what's happening in Syria. We're engaged in what's happening in Egypt, in various locations, Iran, Turkey, Yemen, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. And we could look further afield to Kashmir, the Rohingya, the Uyghurs, and we haven't even gone outside of the Muslim world yet to look at various other peoples who suffer incredible injustice. What does this tell us about where we are? And how is it possible for anyone to have any kind of hope to emerge from this unscathed?
I think a key element is what you alluded to in the final remark, Dr. Anas, that we need to look at this from two different lenses. The lens that looks at the immediate and all these complications and all these developments on various levels and who's governing what and how, what kind of balances of power are in play and stuff like that. But also, it's very important to keep another lens that look at more sort of a comprehensive and global ideas. And I like to look at our world today and pose the following question, and I hope we can discuss it today. Are we seeing a crisis of performance of a civilizational model that needs to be managed better? Or are we actually seeing a crisis of the model itself, of the very core of the model itself? I think that's a question we need to ask. What we're seeing in Gaza, is this sort of an error of judgment? Is it sort of a breach? Or is it actually a manifestation of the very fundamentals of the civilizational model that has been actually ruling the world for several centuries? I would argue that we need to have different tools to try and address a question like this. Not just look at crises, numbers of victims and so on, but look at much more comprehensive and deeper phenomena that can actually help us address the question. For instance, I would like to pose the question. The very essence of the human being that lives on earth today, what the Quran called the sibgha, very hard to find an English term for this word.
Subhatullah.
Subhatullah. This subgha of the human being that is being gradually developing over the last few decades. What kind of a human being is that? You know, it's not that only that people are acting in cruel ways and so on, but the question is, what do people want in life, and why are perspectives of human beings becoming so shallow and so narrow and so individualistic and so selfish, if you will, that we are fighting over all kinds of resources in ways that, if you really think about them, are probably going to take humanity to the brink of total collapse. These are the kinds of questions we need to ask. Are our bigger systems, let's say, forget government and policy, for systems like education, system like the health system, all these things, are these designed with the right kinds of values for a human that is going to live on this earth in peace, or are they, in their very design, built in a way that keep us all going in this circle of working very hard, consuming a lot, going through a lot of debt, and finally getting into a lot of conflict?
Is it? I mean, I from what you just said, I'm thinking of three layers probably. The first is the individual, the person. Are we being led by people who are ill-educated, who are ignorant, who don't have the kind of intellectual prowess to navigate these waters? Is it, you said the systems, you said the entire processes, the methods that are being used, are those that are the issue? Or is it the values that govern all of this? I mean, what is it? Or is it a combination of all three?
We have to go back to the roots. And I think what you refer to when you refer to individuals or methods, these are just the outcome and the results of the set of values that are being imposed and practiced over centuries now, based on the model that is being adopted by the modernity and the like. It is mainly the separation between the moral values that are dictated to Earth by the creator of the universe, and the insistence of the human being to get separated from these values and walk on his own, and trying to develop his ways, and which led him to believe that he is actually in a struggle with the gods. And you see people saying things like death of God and defeating God and things like that, and this which is the basic origin of what we are suffering from right now. So when you start developing your own set of values, you get directed by your interests. There are no upper values that would control you to not to get into moving into a direction that is harmful to the overall existence. So at the end of the day, gradually, the center of power is moving into very few people who basically control the wealth in the world, and they drive everything. And in order to achieve their interest, they start wars. They start or control epidemics, for example, and how medicine is being introduced to people, and they control the production of weaponry, all this stuff that is ultimately leading to their welfare and the accumulation of their wealth on the account of normal people, ordinary people. And there is no limit for that. And this is now developing into new models, implementing artificial intelligence and big data and stuff like that in order to provide more control over the fate of people, leading to some talking about, in the United States, for example, what is being referred to as the surveillance state. The surveillance state, which is basically that each and every one is being monitored, and it is known exactly what he's doing, because now the technology facilitated this kind of process based on data that is provided by social media, by Facebook, for example, or by other means, so that your interests are being monitored, and then models are being developed in order to even predict your future behavior. And it reached a point that now they are talking about, in some circles in the US, talking about how to isolate a group of people, millions of people, who are opposing the system in case of a major event that took place, for example. How to identify these people based on their data. We are not talking about China. This is being practiced in China for a long time. This, the social credit and all these kinds of... No, this is the United States and basically the West. So all this is stemming from the fact that we are adopting a model that forgot all about the creator of the universe, and aiming at achieving the interest. And gradually this goes up to a very few group of people who get wealthier and richer, and do whatever they can in order to accumulate wealth and step on anyone, any value, any country, anything, in order to maintain these interests. So what I'm saying is that the methods and the people, this is not just incompetency or models or methods that have been wrongly developed or things like that. This is a route based on certain set of values that is naturally giving you what you're seeing as an outcome.
Many years ago, when I was much younger, I remember attending a symposium of sorts in London. And it was essentially under the guise of a commercial venture or a financial economic project or the like. And I remember, and this was way before the explosion in technological advancement that we have today. And I recall someone saying things that at the time I didn't really understand, or I didn't appreciate to the fullest extent. Basically, he spoke at length at the incredible resource which he described as the most valuable product on the face of the earth, which is getting to know everyone's interests, everyone's hobbies, everyone's desires, everyone's likes and dislikes. And basically what he said was, from this, if we get to know every individual's tendencies, we can sell to them directly, rather than speak to the collective, but speak to that individual about what they like, their favorite color, their favorite image, what gets them, to desire a particular object. And he spoke in pure financial terms. Now, a while ago, I recall that particular seminar, which I attended probably 35 years ago. And I now begin to understand the actual implications. But the fact of the matter, and this is probably tying into what you've just said, Dr. Amr, and that is, we're not just talking about financial or economic gains. We're talking about something far more sinister, I would suggest.
Control.
We're talking about control.
Yeah.
We're talking about knowing people's tendencies and dealing with them in a way that keeps them in check, that makes sure that they walk in a particular way, they walk in a particular direction. And this is obviously, I mean, for decades now, Hollywood has been churning out movies and TV shows that tell us that the likes of China and other centralist authoritarian regimes, they practice this in order to control the masses. But like you just said, now more and more we're seeing it, and we're seeing it in quite an awkward way, in a weird way, in that we are told this is for your best interest, that this is for your best interest.
Right.
The implication of this is incredibly vast.
Absolutely. I think also a very interesting question is why now? Yani Dr. Amr suggested absolutely correctly that there is a root, and that root has been there for a few centuries. Why now? And I think that the more we ponder upon this question, you reminded me when you said this guy said this 35 years ago, because about 150 years ago, some Western philosophers predicted not necessarily the very outcomes that we are seeing now, but predicted a fate that humanity is going to somewhere. And they predicted that this will lead to definitely the decline of any civilization that leads people in that direction. The point I'm trying to make is every civilizational model and every civilizational journey has a logic, an internal logic. Looking at the history of the Muslim civilization experience, which was clearly, an experience of humans who made errors and made all kinds of attempts here and there, like any group of humans. But the core, the root that Dr. Amr was talking about was following one way or the other, trying to follow the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and build a civilization accordingly. There was a logic to this experience. This is why when it went up according to that logic. It brought about the kind of human being that lived a certain life, a certain peaceful, pietful life, and so on. When it declined, it also declined based on this logic, when people started losing, the power to actually live up to the will of God. So their civilization went down. Now, the model that has been prevalent for the last 4 or 5 centuries, stemming from the idea that no, we don't need a God to tell us what to do, has its own logic as well. And this logic, though unpredictable in many aspects, but the core trajectory of it you can always figure out. So my point is, those philosophers 150 years ago and this guy 35 years ago, we're actually just looking at the logic of the model as it evolves. If we do the same now, I think we need to be very honest with ourselves and ask the question, how long can humanity take the trajectory that's taking place now? I mean, like you said, we lived in America. When I went to America the first time, 1979, it was really an inspiration, to go to that country. Now look at the dynamics on the social, on the political, on the economic arena. You can hardly think that this would be inspiring to anyone. It's very disturbing, to be honest. It's when you look now at what is going to be happening in America, who's going to run it, and so on, for the next few years at least, you're scared.
But what I believe is that a very important element of the question that you refer to as why now, the very important development in the era we live in is the huge development of technology. This is, I believe, probably the main factor that is leading to what we are going through right now. For example, when I was in the States starting my PhD in 1980s, I had the opportunity to work on the application of artificial intelligence in my specialty of engineering. At that time, the artificial intelligence was just starting. And I didn't see a big prospect of that because of the huge limitations of the ability of the machine to do what an expert does, So I wasn't attracted to that, and I took another path. However, now, after all these years, the development in the abilities for computations, for example, the development of quantum computers, going way up, even the smallest chips, the 7 nanometers, going down to 1 nanometer. You cannot go smaller than that. So you go up to quantum computing and all that, which gives you huge You can do processes in maybe 200 seconds that could take 200 years to do before on supercomputers that exist right now, actually. This is the development we are going through. Some people talk about this development leading to a post-human era. It's not just the man is better able to utilize technology in, living, which is what this is what we are using right now. We are implementing technological tools in order to live in a better way. But eventually, and this could be maybe in a matter of a decade or a little bit more, the ability of the artificial intelligence would be, and the machines would be by far exceeding the human abilities in a way that the humans would be helping the machines to do the job rather than the other way around. Which means that some philosophers talk now about the post-human era. So it's not just that we don't need God, we don't need a man, we don't need people. Some people, it's funny. One of the social scientists was giving a talk, and he said that I wouldn't be very much surprised if in like 10 years' time you'd find demonstrations in the streets asking for the rights of machines, marrying machines and people. It's like now gay marriage and things like that. Why? Because as a matter of fact, as a human being, what do you need from marriage? You need somebody who can understand you, who can respond to your needs, and this can be very much easier done by a machine that would really have the capability of really understanding you individually, more maybe than your wife or your husband. If you're so. Why not marry a machine? There are other things, but let's figure out how to deal with it. But still, this could be more satisfactory. It would be more satisfactory for people to employ machines. It's not just cost efficiency. It is a much better performance and much better achievement of the objectives of your firm, which means that this is not a human life. What we call now unhuman, it would be by far more, so much unhuman, in just a few years. I don't know whether the universe or the world would take it until we reach that position, or the civilization probably is in the secular civilization is in a status that I don't think it could last much longer than that. But if we assume that it did, it is going to unpredictable.
From what you're both saying, I think we're in agreement that, and the point you started off with, Dr. Hussein, is extremely interesting, in that you described, if I may use my own words, a God-centric existence with an existence that has man or human beings at its focal point. And I think that's what we have today. And that's where what we call a secularist, or what you termed a secularist civilization, rather than secularism being that everyone is to their own and they could believe as they wish and everyone will respect the other and the like, rather than that, it has become an oppressive, authoritarian regime that forbids religion, at least in the public sphere. So, and as evidence, and I think that we can come up with many evidence, but the one thing that we can say is that despite all these advancements that you talk about and everything that we see around us, humanity is probably and arguably at its most depressed, at its most miserable, at its most struggling in terms of living day to day. If anything, I was just recently, I was looking at some stats, and I was seeing the incremental rise in suicide rates.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeing how cases of mental illness and depression are exponentially on the rise for the past 15, 20 years. Economic crisis after economic crisis, people are struggling. People aren't happier. And you use the word satisfied or satisfaction. People aren't content. They're not satisfied. Plus, obviously, we have now today, we have more wars, more blood spilled for political, economic gains, whatever, far more insecurity than we have ever had as a human race. So in a way, you could pass judgment and say humanity today, despite all these advancements that we are told are here for our happiness and our ease of life, but we are at our most miserable. So the question is, I mean, why? Is it our shortcoming in terms of coming to terms and coexisting with this new development and the technological advancement? Or is it something else? Why is it that today the world is like it is?
I think the very core point that Dr. Am raised about technology is an enabler, has always been an enabler in history. When philosophers discuss what they call engines of history, what makes humanity go in a certain way, they talk about fundamentals and then they talk about enablers. The key fundamental is worldview, like you said, God-centered or centric or human-centric kind of a reference for a worldview. Not only that, but history changes when you have very capable, very disciplined, very sincere individuals and groups carrying this worldview to make it a reality on the ground and having a context that's sort of accepting of this worldview. These are the fundamentals. As soon as these fundamentals are in place, then the technology, which is always an enabler in human history, becomes a race, for those who hold these worldviews to latch on to as much technological advancement to support the worldview. It's not true that the current technology has ever been designed with the purpose of making people happy, because the worldview is not designed to make people happy. The worldview is designed to make people work harder and get a lot of material, immediate, individualistic pleasures. That's different than happiness. At least philosophically speaking, we can argue what happiness means. The indicators that you mentioned, Dr. Anas, about suicide and lack of happiness, there are on the individual and on group level, there are far more alarming indicators if you take it to the macro level. At the macro level, humanity is actually shrinking to a very alarming degree. This is an issue that people, for some reason, don't like to talk about, as if this is a sign of progress, that you have less kids, smaller families, do away with the family structure altogether, have alternative social units and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, collectively, what this is leading to is a very fundamental challenge to the very existence of human beings. You read some of the more pessimistic, if you will, population studies that build on certain models that are sort of extreme a little bit in their projections, and they tell you that the population of Europe, for instance, if the tendencies go as they are now, toward the end of the century, will be like half the number of people who were at the beginning of the century, except for getting migrants from outside and injecting. And then now we have political movements that are against including any migrants and so on. So what's the solution? You go to a country like South Korea, a country like Japan, which are, by the way, jewels of the Western paradigm, if you will, of the secular model. And these countries, as great as they are facing very, very serious threats.
Yeah, the institution of marriage is now being totally outcast.
Totally dismantled.
Yeah.
And even my point is, this is not limited to a particular geography. Civilizational models, when they dominate, they cross geographies. So even in our own Islamic world, in our own backyard, this decline is taking place. A country like Turkey, which we see as an example of a country that's really trying hard to make its footprint and become a strong regional power and so on. We're very proud of its experience. But if you follow the data, every single year there is a decline. And last year, if I remember correctly, was the first year that the actual number of people living in Turkey declined. This year it's even worse. China is the same. And so on and so forth. So the point is, what kind of a civilizational model would get humanity to decide to extinguish itself and build machines, to run life on Earth?
And probably along the very same line that you're arguing, Dr. Hussein, the fact that we had recently the American presidential elections, one of the biggest issues that were being debated was abortion, which is now something that is seen as mainstream. It's seen as totally acceptable. In Europe, for instance, the argument for euthanasia. And in fact, the other day I was reading a report about, in one of the Scandinavian countries, I can't remember which, whether Sweden or Finland, about institutions that are now being founded under the regulation of governments, which basically their main mandate is to regulate suicide, meaning not just euthanasia. We're not talking about people who are terminally ill or of old age and the quality of life has declined. We're talking about people who have given up, who have lost their sweethearts, who have lost their jobs, who are going through a financial crisis. They want to kill themselves. So rather than, and this is what had me laugh despite the tragedy of the whole story, that someone was saying, well, why jump in front of a train and cause so much inconvenience to thousands of commuters when you can go to somewhere that would, very peacefully, very easily give you an injection and you'd be done with. It's we seem to be with the kind of declining numbers of humanity that is in a way deliberate. It's not by accident, it's by design, by planning. It seems that now, if we're good at anything, we're good at the industry of death rather than that of creating life.
And to be able to see the difference, a few years ago, it was considered a criminal activity to run like a website to give people advice on issues like suicide, the way you said.
Yeah.
That was illegal.
Yes.
Now there are institutions that facilitate this.
Absolutely.
In very few years. It gives you an idea of the change that is being imposed on humanity. Talking about, let me go back to the surveillance state, for example. If we follow what's happening in the United States, very interesting. You'd find a company, one of the most famous companies now in the US, Palantir, which is probably the leader of the concept of the surveillance state, which serves the interest of the intelligence agencies. This company is controlled by two people, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp. During the latest election, Peter Thiel was strongly behind Trump, while Alex Karp was strongly behind Kamala Harris. Okay. So you get the idea that these people are manipulating, are working on the agenda of. They don't have a real direction of supporting, for example, a conservative view or a liberal view or whatever. No, there is some sort of manipulation that is taking place by this type of organization that is strongly tied to all kinds of surveillance that is being implemented in the US. It gives you an idea that somebody is playing. For example, Peter Thiel pushed this guy for being a vice president, J.D. Vance, from nowhere. Actually, he was a normal student. He supported him very much to go to Yale and get a degree in law, and then provided him with, I remember, $15 million to become a senator back in, just 2 years ago. He is not a veteran politician, by the way. And he is 37 years old.
Yeah.
So you feel that this kind of person is a kind of champion of this type of state that is probably going to take charge after Trump, And I'm not talking about conspiracy. Again, I'm talking about planning. Planning to take charge.
And apparently when he was backing Harris, it was like hedging your bets, basically betting on every single horse, so that ultimately whoever wins, you get to win.
Yeah, I mean, there are interests on this camp and interests on the other camp, but at the end of the day, somebody doesn't care about values, doesn't care about even the ideology. It's about achieving a certain agenda at a certain moment of history. There is a big change that is being planned for right now, and there are a lot of indications. Again, this is not a conspiracy theory, as you said in the beginning. We are seeing with our own eyes, what is happening. It's about controlling people. And it's not controlling people now in Africa or in Asia or poor countries. It's controlling people in the US, in Europe, in everywhere in the developed world. So we are getting into a really dangerous. When we talk about the decline in the number of people, at the same time, you find theories talking about the golden billion or things like that. The deliberate decrease of human people, the humans, in order to maintain the good life that is based on the resources that's available and things like that. People are theorizing this.
Who gets to win? I mean, when we're talking about this, from what we've been saying over the course of the past few minutes, I mean, it's fairly dire. It looks absolutely bleak.
Yeah.
Who gets to win?
I remember, that reminds me of a very famous series of ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Let's just make reference here, in which he predicts at a certain point in time there will come a system where nobody wins. Even those who rule it, even those who have all the power, all the money, everybody is miserable. And I'm beginning to see that we're getting closer to this phase, tying into what Dr. Amr was talking about in the surveillance state. I think we also can use these civilizational tools that I was talking about in the beginning to understand where this is coming from. You look at a country like the United States. There is no country like the United States, by the way. It is the United States. And you ask yourself, some of these ideas that we're discussing today, are these sort of clear and obvious to everyone? If this is the case, then how come that this is the leader of not the free world, this is the leader of the whole world, has been so for a century? I propose that when you use these civilizational tools, you begin to also see very complicated structures. You can understand the surveillance state that Dr. Amr is talking about only when you appreciate some of these sort of mega structures. America has a core. That's what a lot of people outside and even some people inside America don't really see. The core of the American system, if you will, is the part of American life and American power and American resources that's tied directly to these secular values that we're talking about in their most extreme expression. But that's not the only manifestation of life in the States. We all live there. So there is definitely a much different liberal perspective with a lot of people, especially in the academia. A lot of us experienced America basically through academic life. And when you do that, then you get the impression that this is a country that really has a very deep respect for basic human rights and basic liberties. Because this is, the academic institution is like that. The entertainment institution, by the way, is also like that. The education institution like that. Not the army, not the corporate America, not the core. The core institutions in the capitalist system and in the imperial perspective of the country, which I argue that these are really the core, are those who produce people who are in power and so on. There is also a third, manifestation of life in America, if you live there long enough, which is the religious community. There is a large religious community in America that would definitely, when you live with them on a daily basis, would never relate, for instance, to stuff that is taking place in other parts of the world with all these cruelties and stuff like that. So you have a core, you have a liberal, you have a religious sort of bulks and manifestations. They are definitely interdependent. Now, put yourself in the seat of those in the middle and those who are in the core. What happens when these manifestations start rebelling against each other, start misaligning? If the universities start contesting and start making real trouble regarding something like Gaza, what does the core do? This is where you need the surveillance, because you definitely, as a core, need to suppress this liberal attitude. Religious communities, like the Muslim community in the West, if you start rebelling against your country's stand in a place like Gaza, then there should be the tools in place that put you back under control. The country cannot sustain itself if these big chunks
start warring
each other without one controlling. I think the surveillance state is one answer to this multiplicity, which I think is getting America into a place where the founding fathers, as they call them, have never imagined. They imagined a lot of things that we don't agree with, but not that.
And actually, it's not just because of something remote like Gaza. It's going to be for something domestic, and what's happening right now is the increasing rate of presence of people who are objecting actually to this system, to the control, to the oppression, to the facilitation of violence all over the world, and all that. They are starting to speak up. And actually, that's why we get to know the information that we're talking about right now. I mean, how do we know about the surveillance states? Through the writings and the podcasts by people who are now jumping deeply into these issues. And as Dr. Hussein said, the only way to control these people will not by democratic means, will not be by convincing. No. The easiest way is to control them by force. And that is why, remember when I talked about having a database, this is real. I'm not talking about somebody imagining
hypothetical.
No. This is real. This is a database of like 3 million people who are considered to be enemies of the system. That in case of an event that is major, they have to be rounded up. They have to be eliminated or whatever, okay? Because they are the one who are, in their view, threatening the model, the core model that whoever is in charge in the U.S. is trying to implement. And it's actually when I talk about whoever is in charge, this is the deliberate expression. The president now in the U.S. is never in charge, or the government, or there is definitely somebody who is running the show. And we get this from the quality of people we see as presidents. Okay.
I mean, God forbid that Trump will be actually leading the United States.
It has turned out that Trump is even, sometimes better than Biden, for example, or, the way, can you imagine a country like the United States being run by somebody like Biden, with all due respect? Not about, forget about his original talents. Talk about his age, his abilities. Is it possible that somebody like that, who can hardly manage his own needs, to be running the United States, that is running the whole world? I'd say it doesn't make sense. So why he actually intended to go back to election again, but this deep state found out that he would never win, so they actually managed a coup against him to bring Harris, who eventually lost to Trump. So what I'm saying is that again, the surveillance state, the control state is يعني going up in a very fast rate. And this, of course, helps also the autocratic regimes that are in our area, because now they can get away with whatever they want. Actually, they are using the tools that are provided to them by the developed world, in terms of surveillance programs, in terms of other technological means to keep more control on the.
We're going to come to that, because we're going to carry on this discussion. But I am interested in this idea about the core that is of the United States. Was it always like this, or has this developed over time? Was this the idea from the very start, let's say a century ago, when the United States began its ascendancy in terms of the world stage and global prowess and the like? Was it always like that? Was it designed to be like this, or is it something that just happened because of changes that occurred on the world scene?
Well, on a philosophical level, at least, any civilizational model that starts with this idea of being man-centrist rather than always needs a central controlling regime. Philosophically speaking, there is always going to be a minority of sorts that is controlling majorities of thoughts. That's by the way, part of the definition of any system you look at, part of the definition of capitalism, part of the definition of democracy, and so on. It's not even a secret or something that we hide. I remember when I took a course with an economic professor in the States back in the days when I was just doing my MBA there. And here's the argument he made. He in defense of capitalism, he says, guys, if we in this room, about 15 students or something, everyone has $2,000 and wants to invest it, okay? Should we all try to go to the market and try our luck? Or should we find the most talented one of us and give him the $30,000? And the answer is clear. Of course, you find this Joe and give him the $30,000 and we'll all be better off. This whole idea of needing, a center here to make the machine work. Of course, the professor didn't mention that this Joe is also going to have the army, and going to have the police, and going to have the media, and so on and so forth, under control. So philosophically speaking, you definitely need a core. The question is, what is the nature of that core? Because I also feel that some of the comments we're making may sound as if it's like pure criticism. I think we need to also be fair and consider the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that this civilizational model that we are criticizing now has been able to achieve quite a great deal of progress.
Of course.
For itself and for humanity. There is no denial. But the point is, it's built in such a way that when the cycle goes to where we are at now, this incredible progress turns into an existential crisis for humanity.
A destructive power.
Destructive power, because it redefines humans, and it reinforces systems that are, like Dr. Amr gave examples of, that are designed to control people. And ala fikra, by the way, it's not just the surveillance state. I argue that the entertainment industry is a much more powerful tool of control. I lived in the United States and I worked in the United States, and I know exactly what life looks like. You work a lot of hours in the day, and then as soon as you're done and going home, you need to entertain yourself, and you entertain yourself through very specific tools. You have the sports, and you have arts, you have the movies, you have the music, and so on. So all this at the end of the day sort of put you in a certain life pattern, if you will, that we always think that we're making choices and we're free and so on. We're actually living within this pre-designed, very rigorous and very rigid kind of a lifestyle. So the point is, there is definitely a center, and Eisenhower also alluded to what he called the industrial military complex. and this was mid of last century. The core has always been there philosophically. Strategically speaking, it evolved, and I think people who are interested in this whole idea of centrality within the secular model will look at central elements within a societal level, within a government level, within political, within social, within economic. There is always a core. There is always someone in the center. And the very idea, Dr. Anas, of the nation state is just a manifestation, an incredible manifestation of centrality and concentration of power. You look at that and you compare it to what we call the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah, and you see immediately that in this Ummah, I refer you to the work of
Ismail Farouqi?
Not Ismail Farouqi, of course, but as recently as the Ummatic Institute that's doing a lot of great work in that direction. And what they are arguing is most of the power within in the Islamic civilization experience was entrusted with the nation, with the people. Most of the power in the nation state is entrusted with the few who are ruling the system. So it's a philosophical and strategic.